Welcome to the Exhaust Notes podcast.
What is good, everyone? Welcome to the Exhaust Notes Formula One podcast. Your new favorite Formula One podcast. Your favorite Formula One podcast, favorite F1 podcast. I don't even know, man. I'm lost. But I'm with my guys, Todd and Rohit, to talk about, I don't know, maybe one of the best races of the year so far, to be honest. So,
what's ahead of it? I'll ask you, both.
I mean, I'm completely biased. My natural, my first instinct is to say Lando winning Miami, but that's just that relief of Lando winning.
That's selfish, Nicholas. So that's very selfish.
It is. I'm sorry. Definitely the best race of the year. And we're talking about Canada.
It's the first time Canada and best has been said in a sentence in a long time.
Since 2011.
Yeah.
That was a fantastic race. But if you get a Canada track in the wet, since it's on an island and those weird showers kind of pop up out of nowhere.
Here's the thing. There's a phrase, if you're a European soccer fan, saying it's coming home. And that usually involves the English team choking away yet another tournament title. I thought, given a certain Canadian's proclivity in the rain, that it was coming home. And lo and behold, it did not come home, just like the way the English never bring a title home. So maybe everything worked out the way it was supposed to. But fun race. I mean, I can't remember a race in recent memory where there was I wouldn't say a realistic likelihood, but there was a decent chance that we could have had one of 5 winners, including Lewis Hamilton, breaking his duck of 2.5 years of not winning a race, which continues on. But like I said, there's so much to parse through. Where do we want to start? Because I'm okay with Max winning a title if this is what every race feels like going forward.
Yeah, for sure. I want to start pre-race and quote your favorite rapper's favorite rapper, CeeLo Green, and big F you to Jacques Villeneuve, because wow, did he go in on my boy?
Yes.
He's Nick's boy too, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm a fan.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying.
Todd's that. I think Todd has the, let's say, the upper hand when it comes to fanboying over Danny Rick, though. I'm definitely an A tier fanboy when it comes to Danny Rick.
Okay, so I'll take S tier fanboy.
I mean R tier considering Ricciardo.
Geek. I respect the fact that Danny Rick is not performing at the level of last of the late breakers, as we used to love to call him. But he isn't. He still has flashes of brilliance. He's won a race in the last 2 years. He qualifies well. Occasionally, he's still got some pace, and I think when he has the confidence, which is more often than not, strike that, reverse it. When he has the confidence, which unfortunately isn't as often as it should be, he performs well. Usually when he's pissed about getting hit or a penalty or something, and he just focuses on the race, he's actually pretty quick. But man, how do you have a pundit for F1 on F1, or actually I think it was on Sky Sports, but
yeah, Sky Sports,
whatever. And him saying why is he in F1? Of all the people, you could say that about Guan Yu Zhou, Logan Sargent, maybe the Alpine boys, kind of. I know their car's dog shit.
Yeah.
There's so many other people. What did he do to Jacques Villeneuve to deserve those comments? It's insane.
I was going to ask you, is there prior history, or was there any sort of overlap between Mr. Villeneuve's career and Danny Rick's?
No overlap.
Was he?
No.
Was he as charismatic? Because he seemed pretty boring in his analysis.
He's definitely pretty charismatic. He's regarded as a very charismatic.
So is this just charismatic jealousy? I mean, are we going to see a similar rant from Danny Rick in 15 years when Lando's on his last legs and he's going to demand that he also leave the grid?
No, I don't think so. So correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but I think Jack is the last Canadian F1 champion.
Yeah.
And that was 97, 98, something like that. So it's been a while since the land of Maple has had a champion, but like I don't think that there's any prior beef with them. At least I'm not aware of any. But this isn't the first time that he's said something. It hasn't been this direct, though.
It's the most Go ahead, Nick.
I was just gonna say, and I didn't see anything like previously to that, or like that would lead up to it. But I think that it was like Friday, right? Like first before, like it was like the intro to the weekend, like weekend warm up kind of vibe, whatever Sky Sports' version of that is, because we obviously can't watch Sky Sports over here. But I think that, like I just saw today too, like that so Ricciardo clapped back and was basically like, what is he even doing? Like, did he hit his head up playing ice hockey or something? and then like Villeneuve basically came back today and said that he's taking it too far and making it personal. And it's like, I feel like this is like very, I apologize to any of our Canadian listeners. I feel like this is very Drake-like in its approach to trash talking or beefing, to poke the bear and then complain that the bear smacked you across the face.
First of all, how dare you? Because you may say Drake, but I would say the finest trash talker of this generation from a sporting perspective is one Shorzy from the hit Canadian documentary series Shorzy. So if you aren't familiar, listeners, get familiar. But if this was Drake, he would have, and he in this case would be Jacques Villeneuve, would have like a secondary insult ready and then empty the bag in the secondary one and then just think that's it and go about his merry Canadian way. Although I would make the argument also this is very un-Canadian-like behavior. This is the most aggression I've seen in Canada in quite some time.
Yeah. What about Kendrick versus Drake?
Well,
I mean, isn't he?
And at this point, I think you revoke Drake's status. He's been hanging out down south for far too long. Like, we've corrupted that boy. He is not the same as he was with his first mixtape.
I mean, you saw the photos that came out today, right?
Oh, yes.
Drake had a photographer taking pictures of him at his kid's soccer practice. So, if anything, even if Kendrick did nothing more than make an absentee father show up for his kid's soccer practice, you got to be thankful for that, right? So.
Can we talk about his fit? That was that's like Biggie meets JC Penney. Like, that was I didn't know what to make of the fit.
I didn't either. Okay. And then somebody tried to say that it was like trying to be like Kendrick's Mr. Morale album. And I just don't understand, because the pants were like,
they're too baggy.
They're basically like Lennon Jinkos, like
Linkos.
Yeah. Anyway, back to Formula One. Jacques Villeneuve, hot take, lighting Danny Rick on fire was like, I want, like, the quote that I saw from Danny Rick. And obviously you hear this every time somebody says anything negative about another celebrity or personality, is like, oh, I didn't hear what he said, but I'm sure it was just, nonsense, right? I heard it, sent it to you guys, and was like thinking exactly what you said, Todd, about Danny Rick. The only time that he does well is when he's just on fire and something has pissed him off and he gets back to his old form. And I was like, could this be the thing? Like, I was literally thinking, like, I didn't even say it because I didn't want to jinx it, but I was like, if Danny Rick is in the mix at the end of this weekend because somebody talks some trash, then we are going to annihilate him every episode of Exhaust Notes and send it to him every week so we can see him back up there competitive.
No, I mean, when he qualified 5th, he ended up 8th. Like, that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, Checo Perez would kill for that right now.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Well, yeah. Also, both the Ferrari boys would kill for that right now, unfortunately. It's a rough weekend.
Yeah, it was. Speaking of fits, though, let's tie in Ferrari real quick. Did you guys see that they're like selling? They made some sort of like hockey jersey Ferrari uniform. Can F1 just please, to God, stop peddling us this BS, thin, cheap fan gear? Like, you already charge way more than basically any other sport. That's like, I guess, all align that to baseball this year with their jerseys and their see-through pants and all that. Like, everything is going the way of super fast fashion, and it's insane. Like, if I paid $300 for a Rangers Stadium Series jersey this year, which I wouldn't, you're out of your mind charging $300 for that. I'd be so pissed if it shows up and it's just like iron-on patches. Like, can we just stop? They look cool, but when you get it, it's going to like peel off in 2 washes.
I mean, it's one of those things as well where I agree with your sentiment of this was also the second year in a row, because I believe for last year's Austin race, they made a football jersey. And
McLaren did.
No, yeah. Ferrari did as well.
Oh, did they? Okay.
Ferrari did a football jersey as well, and the quality left a lot to be desired. It was one of the few things that I think even Fanatics saw that and like, oh, we're definitely not the worst anymore, because this is atrocious.
I did see the McLaren one in person at IndyCar, Laguna Seca IndyCar. I guess that's 2 years ago now. But that one was actually like a mesh jersey material. So give them a slight pass on that, but it still wasn't. For our audio listeners, yeah. Nick's showing off the McLaren football right now.
I was going to say, football. That might be the most bootleg Michigan football I've ever seen.
How much was that? $75?
Oh no, I got it. I got it on eBay for like 15.
Deep discount.
Yeah. Retail probably was like 75. I mean, that's a whole conversation in itself, right? Like the fanaticizing of sports apparel should be the name of the book, but like Fanatics has basically come in and taken all the licensing and
I got it. Call it the Emperor's New Clothes, the Fanatics story.
Yeah.
They already ruined hockey hats, so
yeah, hockey hat. I mean,
baseball
everything, right? Baseball jerseys. Well, so the interesting thing about that, and this is a little bit of a deep tangent, but New Era just bought 47 brand. So they basically have kind of a lock on the fitted side of any kind of game worn stuff, right?
Headwear apparel.
Headwear, yeah. Like 47 brand has a like very Mitchell and Ness nostalgic licensing agreement deal that I think it brings New Era up in a lot of ways. But obviously, I'm pretty sure Fanatics bought Mitchell and Ness a year or two ago, right? So all of this stuff is kind of like the dumbing down of like quality in American everything is like these giant conglomerates that continue to like scoop up companies and then take away any soul that's left. So nobody there gets to care about it. And even if they do care about it, somebody says, oh no, we don't make enough money if you care about it that much,
Yep. I have another tangent to throw in before we talk about actual race stuff. I was listening to another podcast.
How dare you?
Another F1 related podcast. And Lawrence Barretto was the guest on said podcast. And he is, if there was ever a perfect crossover guest for us to have, it is Lawrence Barretto. And the reason I say that is because he was interviewed about his footwear. He's famous for having, he's famous in the F1 paddock for always having kind of eclectic or eccentric footwear. And he revealed that to a race weekend, he will bring around 16 pairs of shoes.
Wow.
So one to run in, a comfy pair, a couple pairs of flip-flops, etc. And then 10 actual, like, I'm going to wear these on air, either sneakers or fashion type shoes, boots, etc.
I'm doing this wrong, man. Like no wonder I'm just a lowly podcaster and not a host of.
I think you're mid-tier, if I'm being honest. Let's not go lowly just yet.
I mean, I'm also like, I've also been wearing sneakers and doing the sneaker thing for so long that I don't want to take, I took 2 pairs on my Tokyo trip for, almost 2 weeks because it was just like, I don't need to play the game of having a different pair every single day on this trip. Like, although like I had to break my 366 pairs this year, which shout out to Iron Trev for keeping that going. Cause
There's a couple in the Discord still doing
there's a few people in there. Yeah. But that's crazy. I didn't realize that I've only seen, I think we had a conversation in the Discord or on the show like a couple years back about Will Buxton wore something that was interesting and people were asking about it or something. But
yeah, I watch a lot of the like pre-race stuff on F1 TV, and occasionally when he wears like some more crazy pairs, they'll like talk about it. Like, he wore like an all chrome pair one time, and that like got a lot of attention from his co-hosts. But I knew he was into shoes or footwear in some fashion, but I didn't realize he rolled that heavy, because that's, even if I'm going on a trip where I'm like, yeah, it's gonna have a focus around shoes, I'll take like 4 pairs max.
Yeah,
that's insane.
Exactly. Yeah,
and he's traveling internationally.
Speaking of 4 things in a max, guys, we had a 5-way race almost happen. How about that segue?
Great segue.
Thank you. I try every now and then. Between Max, Lando, Oscar, and both of the Mercedes boys, George and Sir Lewis, like, where are you? What was your guys' thought process around, okay, so-and-so is going to win the race at this moment, and then something happened, and then you're like, okay, who else is going to win this race? Were you guys just kind of turning into 5-year-old and just going with, I'm going to go with the guy that's in front right now until the next guy overtook him? Or were you guys pretty locked down that, yes, this is inevitable, this is Max Verstappen racing any sort of Formula One track? This is more along the lines of, what's the journey like? Because we know what the end will be.
I mean, I thought at like, I don't know, maybe 20 laps in, I thought Lando had a pretty good shot of just running away with it. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, that safety car that threw him off and everybody pitted, and then Max ended up in the lead. It was like, okay, there was a safety car, and then the second time was like when he came out of the pits.
Yeah,
right? He got back in front, and then Max came out, and Lando was just on too fresh of tires, got a little off the line, just a tiny bit, couldn't get the traction, and then it was like, oh shit, well that was fun, but you know, I honestly thought like George would have easily taken Lando to get further up at some point, but then like I don't know, like I don't have any ill will towards George Russell, but I feel like he makes a lot of mistakes in those key moments where like a lot of guys will have some shitty things happen or a pit strategy go wrong, but more often than not, it feels like George is the one that makes the mistake.
He's got a bit of,
and pushed himself out of that opportunity.
I was going to say, he's got a little bit of Charles Leclerc about him, because what we vilified Charles Leclerc for, George has it in spades, and I thought it was a pretty telling moment. 2 things, actually. One was, I think, was it Crofty who pontificated the same exact thing you did, Nick, but he was very quick to frame it as a question as opposed to a statement.
Yeah.
And then post-race, I think that same Formula One crew that involved Jacques Villeneuve, how about that for a butchered pronunciation? They were interviewing.
I like how they keep changing, keep doing it.
Yes. It's like, what is it? In Robin Hood Men in Tights, every time you look up, the mole's in a different location. That's how my pronunciations are. But anyway, talking about Jazzy J, a.k.a. Jacques Villeneuve, Danica Patrick, who I continue to agree with you, Todd, I've never seen a more worthless commentator in any sport. They were asking Toto Wolff about George's chances, and it was so quick to see Toto be like, he wasn't going to win. Like, let's call a spade, essentially.
Yeah.
And this, for all intents and purposes, is going to be Mercedes' number 1 driver for what? At least the next 3 years? 4 years?
Yeah, by all accounts. I mean, I honestly believe that maybe up to like 20, 25 laps into it, you know, the first good while, it seemed like George had the pace, and he was out front. It was in the wet. It seemed like everything was kind of coming up Millhouse for him. And then, like, I wouldn't say all hell broke loose, but it just kept being like another little thing that kind of stacked up, right? I honestly thought Lando, with the pace he had when he was catching Max the first time, I was like, oh, something's clicked right now. The temperature, the tires, the fuel loads, like because he was, I think at that point, like almost 2 seconds a lap faster than Max.
Yeah, and that's right after George kind of fell off the lead, right? Like that moment, whatever that was, 20-ish, 23, somewhere in there, it was like, I just felt like Lando was on like a different level all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
And then like, yeah, like you said, it's kind of like one thing after another, like kind of like tumbled everyone around other than Max being at the front. Like everybody else behind had some weird things, you know, all the way down to like Yuki, right? Like Yuki was like in 7th or something. And then what did he do? He spun out like, or no, he went through the what's the
turn one?
Yeah. That's like, and they were joking about like, does it count if you have to be within it? Does it count if you take the barrier with you? You know?
No, that was turn 3 and 4 when he was sliding sideways and took out the bollard.
Yeah.
All like, quick tangent on that. Like, how do the race directors think that that's makeable, even in the dry? It's a grass patch. Yeah. They're going like, I don't know, 120 maybe ish around that corner. If they have any loss of grip, they're not going to gain it back on the grass to go around that bollard. Yep. Like, I agree it should be a grass patch, but like, just because if it was like a concrete runoff, people would miss it on accident all the time.
Yep.
And whatever. But I don't know, that was stupid.
No, but it was a otherwise stupid moment in what I thought was a pretty great race for Yuki, because for all intents and purposes, the tire whispering that he and Esteban Ocon did during that race was something to behold. And here, once again, we've been singing Yuki's praises, and it's one of those things now that when I look in DraftKings, I always look at the fact that they have a separate category for the driver who is not in the top 5 teams. You can bet on who that's going to be. And I want to say for the last 4 races, Yuki's got the best odds. So per this, he's the 11th best driver in the world, which is saying something considering we used to make fun of how bad that car was. We used to make fun of how short, not only in stature, but in terms of his actual temper as well. Yuki has really matured. And I thought it was also telling. We never got to hear Yuki's audio breakdown during that spin, because I think that would have been one for the ages.
Oh, man, I didn't even think of that. I want to go back and watch the onboard during that part of the race. I'm sure it was quite colorful.
Hey, Jinx.
Yeah.
Man, that race, even when Max was out front again towards the end, then he gave us the little Lewis Hamilton, something's wrong with the car, kind of like there was a little bit of hope all the way to the end. He's like, something about the suspension being stuck, whatever, can't go over the curbs. And I was like, and for a couple of laps, I was like, oh, wow, like his pace is off. And then we're like, okay, maybe somebody can attack him or whatever. And then like 2-3 laps later, it was like, fastest lap.
And not only that, there was that moment in the race where I think it was both combination. I forgot what the exact combination, was of the McLarens, whether it was, I think it was Lando, Oscar, and George were kind of a mini pack. And the commentators were very quick to point out that, hey, they could work together and then go bring Max down. But no, they continued to race. And I get that. In the heat of the moment, in the heat of competition, you truly want to go after it and be the best in that little section. But I do think it was one of those things where their own perceived selfishness caused us to not get a more competitive race in terms of the actual racing.
Yeah, because I think like at that moment when the 3 of them were kind of grouped up together, they were collectively like 2 seconds behind, 2.5 at most, or whatever. Lando was 2.5 behind. And then they did the little back and forth thing and, finished. I think Lando was like almost 4 seconds behind Max or something like that by the end of the race. And obviously if he wasn't fighting with George and Oscar. George fighting with Oscar, it would have been much different. But yeah, I think it was also interesting to see Lewis all of a sudden just hop up right into the mix, and then obviously George caught him again, but it was just surprising to me to see. It's like weird because like over time, when a team like Mercedes goes from us expecting them to win for 8 years straight to they can't figure out how to make the car work, to, oh shit, the upgrades are working, is kind of a fun moment of like to the point of like, it could have been 5 different people, you know. On the flip side of that, it sucks for Ferrari when it's like you have, you know, Leclerc coming off and winning his home race in Monaco, and then all of a sudden the car has problems and he's, you know, sitting in the pit. And you're not, even the announcers are like, is there a problem with it? It's been 20 seconds, you know, like what's going on here? And then obviously Sainz as well, the first time I mean, they obviously struggled on, you know, qualifying too, right? Like the first
11th and 12th. Yep.
First time that both of them been out in a long time, out of, you know, P1, but, or I think like just like in general, it feels like it's been forever since both of them were DNF. Like, I don't even remember the last time.
No, I think was it Zandvoort, or how the hell you pronounce that?
Zandvoort last year, did they DNF?
I know Charles did because they kept mentioning that in the broadcast. But no, I mean, here's the thing. They are probably the most punchable. They probably have the most punchable face out of all the Formula One teams, because we do take a lot of joy in pointing out their inaptitude, and we do that quite frequently. But it is something to be said that they are consistent in a way that I don't think I've seen associated with that company or that car manufacturer since I've started watching, which is they're kind of now the new Mercedes in the sense that only time they don't do what they're expected to do is because they shoot themselves in the foot in such a hilarious fashion. And even then, that's kind of been downplayed a little bit because they are 2 professional drivers. I know I ride or die for Carlos more than I do Charles, but I can also say with a decent amount of self-awareness that they are probably the most competitively balanced team outside of maybe McLaren. And it was jarring to see them do the double DNF because that's not what we expect from them now.
Speaking of Ferrari. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nick.
Are you going to talk about Fred Vasseur?
No, I was going to talk about Carlos.
All right. Well, Fred Vasseur kind of summed up Ferrari's weekend by saying, I just hope we got all the shit parts of the season out of the way this weekend.
That's fair.
It's like, yep.
They definitely, yeah, whoever's dog they kicked, they got the car.
Don't you dare say that about Leo.
Somebody, yeah, well, maybe they stole Leo and this is karma, something. But the
you were talking about Carlos, so I'm assuming
Carlos Sainz spin into looping it. So there should have been a penalty there, and I heard them kind of mention it on the broadcast, and I haven't had a chance to look into the rules there. But like, if you, and I understand why drivers do this, if they have a spin where they don't hit anything necessarily, they try to loop the car, like continue the momentum of the car to loop it back around, so they don't have to like back up, so they can just keep going, lose a lot less time that way. But I feel like they should have some sort of regulation that if you're spinning and sliding across the track, you have to bring your car to a stop before you get going again, because that took out Albon and almost Kevin Magnussen would have been a really bad wreck. Like, that was millimeters between their cars.
No, I mean, I just think it's – go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, I feel like that should have been a penalty or an unsafe rejoin penalty or something, even though he wasn't necessarily trying to rejoin. He was trying to recover a spin. But it was along that same vein where he was trying to save the spin and keep going-ish, where that's just – I'm more – like, he ruined Albon's race, whatever, it's racing, it happens. But the Magnussen thing, if he hit him or didn't have the reaction time, he would have launched over Carlos. That would have been a real bad wreck.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I guess, like, related, Checo gets a 3-place penalty for his unsafe.
That was scandalous.
Back to the pits, right? Well, and it to Todd's point, it's like, if Checo's going to get, don't get me wrong, like, I think Checo deserves the penalty, or, you know, Red Bull, through however you want to view that. But, like, basically, to me, it's like, you're going to penalize this guy over here for something that you're deeming as unsafe, when clearly we can look at that and, like, all of us are clinched up, like, oh God, someone's going to die in front of us in this race, because he's just, like, sitting there trying to get back going when obviously there are cars coming at you, you know, 100 and whatever miles an hour. It's crazy.
I had a conspiracy theory. Do you guys feel that, and I'm using the precedence of Ferrari's questionable, mysterious penalty that to this day none of us know about in 2019, about how all of a sudden their car wasn't as fast? Do you think Red Bull did something in the Christian Horner? I don't want to make a light of the situation, but I guess call it a case. And part of the punishment that we will never know about is they had to re-sign Checo. And now because Checo's dog shit, like it's really hurting them on the back end.
You mean Formula One management made them re-sign Checo as a, like, this is your punishment for dick pics kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly.
That is amazing.
Could you imagine?
I can't imagine what else that could force, not even force Red Bull, could convince Red Bull to think, yes, this is our guy.
I mean, just for the sake of his mental health, I hope that Checo never hears this theory, because if you get penalized, if you're the penalization for some other dude sending dick pics, that's got to just wreck you.
Yeah. Well, I still don't understand the signing of Checo, other than they just don't want to disrupt status quo. He's fine in the garage. They walk all over him. Helmet drops how he hates Mexicans every once in a while, and it seems to be okay. Like, he's fast enough sometimes, right? And
the longer you go talking about this, Todd, the more convinced I become that my conspiracy theory is right.
You might be right.
This is some form of fantastic trolling as a punishment. Because go ahead, Nick.
So is this a double entendre of trolling, with Red Bull punishing Checo by making him drive back to the pits to avoid a safety car and take a 3-grid penalty for the next round?
If that isn't a walk of shame in that industry, I don't know what is. And I know this. Actually, no, I don't know this because I'm a gentleman. I would never send a dick pic. But I'm sure many a dick pic has led to somebody taking a walk of shame somewhere down the line. So, yeah, I think so.
I don't know how to follow that up other than
how do you follow up a dick pic, Todd? The girls of this podcast would like to know.
Usually with what you doing, my parents are home. I don't know, something like that.
The only dick pic I ever sent was a picture of Richard Nixon to a lady.
No, you got my brain spinning about the 2019 fuel filter thing, and maybe they replaced all of their pit crew with people on Quaaludes, and that's why it's been so bad. I just like Leo in Wolf of Wall Street when he's trying to drive the Lamborghini.
Yeah,
that is what I imagine
on his elbows.
Their pit crew is. No, the to Nick's point and question, that should have been a much harsher penalty, and I think you said Will Buxton called it out, and then people were kind of coming at him like saying, "Oh, you don't think they deserve it?" And he's like, "No, it's the other way. Like, if you drive an intentionally broken car, an unsafe car on the track, which pieces were falling out of, that big old chunk of rear end plate on the wing fell off and was in the driving line. But I think that another safety car or virtual safety car, something happened around then, so it didn't. They were able to clear it or whatever. I think. I don't know.
Well, because the theory was that they didn't want the safety car, right? Because the safety car would have allowed Lando to get back. You know,
that's right. That's right.
You're going to get bunched up again. The pack is going to get bunched up again. So
they were able to get that big chunk off the track somehow.
I don't remember seeing how, but it was taken care of at some point.
That absolutely could have stabbed somebody in the head.
Like,
so the penalty should have been
into the, somebody hits that at 150 miles an hour and throws it up into the grandstands, and we got like a 1950s era.
What was that race a couple of years ago where somebody got stabbed with a piece of carbon fiber? Was that Silverstone?
I don't remember, but I remember it happening.
Like he hit in the arm with a piece of carbon fiber and like literally stabbed him, like stuck in his arm. It was crazy. Anyway, that should have been a much harsher penalty. And or a fine levied against Red Bull. If they told Checo to do it, then and he complied, then I guess it's still on him. So give him the grid penalty, but that should have been something against Red Bull as well.
So if I can ask a dumb question, because there's probably somebody listening to this episode for the very first time who's probably a Formula One noob, what else could Checo have done in that situation if he is driving that dangerous car?
Pull over to the nearest marshal station.
Okay.
And out of the racing line, away from danger, and park his car, basically.
And as long as he's not in the racing line, that would not beget any sort of safety car then, correct?
Wouldn't, and then they can recover it from there, usually while the racing's going on.
Okay, fair enough. I just wanted to make sure I understood my limited understanding of race etiquette. And yeah, it was absurd because I think even watching it back in real time, the commentators thinking about it and saying, he's not really going to do this, is he? And I think they had to do the nervous chuckle to kind of mask their fear. But also knowing what we've now established as reason and logic, watch now that Checo will get an extension on his contract and he's going to be with Red Bull until the next set of regulations, not in 26 but in 32, because of how atrocious that behavior was.
Yeah, it was bad. I mean, but what would you do as Checo? They tell you drive that car back to the pits. They just signed you for 2 years.
But that's exactly it. If he had not signed that contract, maybe he has the moral compass to be like, no, I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do, which is, as Todd articulated, park to the side, make sure there's no racing line involved anywhere near my proximity, and just wait.
Yeah. So and Buxton even said he said Singapore 2008. So going back to that, it's basically the opposite, right? What happened in Singapore is that Nelson Piquet wrecked his car to bring out the safety car for Fernando Alonso to
so he could catch up. Yeah.
So essentially, he's kind of saying it's just the opposite. Will Buxton is saying it's just the opposite, right? But it's still kind of manipulative in that, you know, you're breaking the rules intentionally. Well, you know, like obviously nobody's going to say it's intentional, but like you kind of know that the car is unsafe if you look at it.
Because the rear wing is hanging.
Yeah, but I 100% agree. Like, you know, with Todd, with both you guys, like, if you're Checo, you're not going to say no to the team orders. Like, it's not I don't think it's a Checo decision at that point. And you can't expect him to not listen to team orders because, to be honest, he can't see what the car looks like.
Yep.
You know,
fair.
Like, even if he is
devil's advocate here, that rear wing was hanging off literally like on the side of the car. You could see that in your rear view mirror. Assuming it was still there. I don't know if it was, but
you know, like you're looking at it through a 3-inch mirror. You have really no idea if it's like hanging or if it's just tilted or, you know, however it's attached, right? Like it's the team's responsibility to say, oh, that shit's fucked up. You got to
retire the car.
Just pull off, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, it's just a shitty situation, and I'm glad like it didn't end up worse. But it also really sucks to see Checo get hit with a penalty when I don't feel like
it's entirely his fault.
Yeah, I don't feel like it's entirely his fault. I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess to be the devil's advocate to that is he can show a freedom of mind and a freedom of willpower and say, no, guys, I'm going to do the right thing. But like we've kind of mentioned ad nauseum, like he has been essentially fighting for his Formula One career for what feels like the last 2 months. And to get that peace of mind and that peace of clarity in terms of, hey, you know what, we've signed you for another 2 years. I don't think any of us would fault him to take what he did in terms of the action and say, yeah, guys, I'll do that, because ultimately he's going to show gratitude because this was his livelihood and they've at least given him 2 more years. Now, that being said, I wonder what Max thinks of all of this in the sense that, yeah, kind of underhanded, kind of diabolical plan. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it really impacted Max's ability to win the race. It would have been very interesting had it actually had a direct correlation to that. But I think this is just something we're going to talk about in this news cycle and then forget about whenever the next egregious thing happens.
I would say that if the safety car comes out, you're basically starting fresh. Like we've talked about how competitive that top 5 was.
Sure.
Like, the safety car comes out and everybody gets fresh tires for the rest of the race. I mean, it could definitely change the results of the race. I mean, I don't know that it changed. Max probably wins, but who knows? Like
on a drying track, though. And if Max's suspension was really messed up,
I mean, I don't believe that his suspension was messed up, but like to the point we were talking about Lando earlier or Russell earlier, both those guys were flying. Like they were on a pace that they haven't had. Like we probably would have said it was going to be one of those two guys if you would have asked us. Even probably 30 laps in, to get to halfway through, right? You kind of just think that they had the pace to catch up in some way. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So speaking of people getting walked all over, let's talk about your boy, Esty Bestie.
Hey, that's the reason why I'm on this podcast as the number one, or I don't even know how to say it in French. Numéro un, apologiste. Apologiste. Yeah, let's just talk about it. There's an awkward pause. I am the noted Esteban Ocon celebrator. There was a moment which I would say this. I thought, frankly, from a pure technical driving prowess, I thought he had the most impressive race weekend out of anybody because he qualified dead last. He was able to get up to 18th because Kick Sauber continues to do Kick Sauber things, which is hilarious non-racing strategy that ends up in them continuing to be very pedestrian. But anyway, I digress with regards to the Kick Sauber thing of it. He was essentially in last place. He worked his way up to 8th place. We mentioned this earlier in the race as well, that he, alongside Yuki, did the best job managing their tires because I believe they were on the intermediates for at least 40 laps of the 70. And then it all came to, knock on wood, not a crashing halt, but a very startling and very strange halt because ultimately Esty Bestie was at 8th place for most of the race. Then Danny Rick took him over because I think the words of Jacques Villeneuve were still in his head. And as I was watching the race, and to Todd's point about the questionable racing direction of this particular Grand Prix, we didn't exactly see what happened, but all of a sudden I just noticed that Pierre Gasly crept alongside him and then he was above him in the very last lap. And then I thought, that's strange. Maybe they'll cover it. And my goodness, when I looked it up on Twitter, there was controversy because ultimately there were racing orders for Esteban to give his spot to Pierre Gasly. Pierre Gasly said, I'm okay with it. Esteban said, I don't think I'm okay with it. They had more of a tete-a-tete, I believe is the French equivalent of that particular conversation. And then long story short, because Esteban is petty and he is French, he said, I will give up my place at the very last lap. And the whole point of that was, so I don't think Pierre Gasly got a fair shot at challenging Danny Rick. Not that I think he was within striking distance of Danny Rick, but I'm okay with Esteban being petty because, frankly put, he's been the best thing about that team for the last, dare I say, 4 years, 5 years. And the most startling stat, and thank you, Iron Trev, for this, was the fact that in the last 3.5 years, Esteban Ocon has secured the same amount of points as Fernando Alonso and Pierre Gasly combined, if I remember that stat from Discord. That's saying something because, all things considered, he is probably, I would say, on the podium for one of the biggest whipping boys of Formula One. He just seems to rub people the wrong way, whether it's for the right reasons or the wrong reasons. And I will say this, he tends not to play nice with others on the track, but he is a talented driver. He tends to do this sort of thing at least 2 to 3 times a year. And I made the prediction, I think, of him staying in Formula One, and they kind of alluded this as well at the end of his race interview. But I think Haas is going to get a winner. But at this point, I'm kind of eating popcorn and just seeing how bad can things get at Alpine, because this is really something. Anyway, end of my filibustering. Where do you guys make of this soap opera that is Alpine racing?
So my memory's a little foggy, but I believe when they made the call to let Pierre through, Danny Rick was a little bit closer to them. I think like a second, maybe a second-ish.
So according to Ocon, he said he was 2 seconds away at that moment.
Balloons. But Pierre did have better pace behind him. Like he was easily staying on the tail of Ocon at that point. So whether or not you're like, I would say, and I know I'm the resident Bestie hater here, Ratatouille. I've never liked him the way he races. I think his peaks have been
aided by others.
No, circumstantial. Like he's been helped along. Like his one race win was because Fernando Alonso had a 10 car width wide car that day. But like, why would you just want to ruin the rest of the time you have in Alpine? That's what I don't understand. Like, you disobey team orders to what? Piss off the people that are already fired you? So you're just going to ruin the rest?
Todd, I mean, I think this is where I'm going to be the devil's advocate. We don't know what exactly happened. The only thing we know from a cryptic term perspective is the fact that it was a mutual decision and it had nothing to do with the previous race on its own. There were additional factors that, as of right now, we don't know. Now,
maybe it's him crashing into his teammates every third race. I'm going to guess that probably had something to do with it.
But at the same time, when they don't crash, Gasly, for all of his hot talk and for all of, I believe, his second year where he was going to be the one that pushes this Alpine team to a race point past the traditional fifth that they've occupied in the last couple of years, he's been low-key the biggest disappointment. This year, the car's disappointment has masked that, but I have been underwhelmed, to say the least, by Pierre Gasly. And this is saying
100% agree.
This is saying something considering he's a race winner. A lot of people consider him to be slightly better than Ocon. And I will say this. I think if we are to read the tea leaves correctly and Alpine looks to sell, it makes sense to keep the safer driver, the one that's not going to crash your car, the one that doesn't have a history of being petulant. But then at the end of the day, these are race car drivers. They're accustomed to being selfish and they're accustomed to be celebrated to being selfish. At the same time, apparently, safety school in French is Gasly, because I don't think he's going to do anything in this car or anything else. And I could make I guess we haven't had a bet in a while. Let's just look at from now, this point forward, for both of their respective careers, I think Ocon is going to be the better driver when it's all said and done.
Respective careers? This year I would give you, but respective careers?
Yeah,
I think the legacy will be Ocon crashes into his teammates. Like, but I can think of like 5 instances off the top of my head of him crashing into his teammates.
But from a Gasly legacy perspective, Gasly had the silver spoon of Red Bull. Now, granted, it was for half a year. I think if you put Ocon in a Red Bull car, he could do much better than what Gasly did. And that's where I continue to maintain the opinion that Gasly may have a higher floor, Ocon has a higher ceiling, and if I'm a race company that is looking to win hearts and minds, I go after the mercurial Frenchman as opposed to the safe Frenchman.
I mean, I think that I don't know, Renault has had, they've been playing musical chairs for the past 6 years, basically, right?
They have.
Nobody, it's almost as if if you speak your mind at Renault, you are out, right? Like Danny Rick went there expecting, we kind of all expected a little bit more, and it was a season, right? So
I mean,
two or three
seasons. No, yeah. But I mean, I know I'm a broken record when I say this. I'm going to use the Drive to Survive era to hopefully make my point, right? Drive to Survive season 1. Who were the 2 drivers on Renault's team that year? Hülkenberg and Carlos Sainz. Not the most loquacious of chaps. Sainz left for essentially Danny Rick to make way, because if I'm remembering the tea leaves, the domino to fall was Danny Rick leaving Red Bull to go to Renault, which opened up Sainz's spot, because I think Danny Rick's first year was with Nico Hülkenberg. Cue the Nico Hülkenberg pronunciations. Hülkenberg, if nothing else, in his last season at Renault, if the narrative was to be believed, they didn't find him exciting enough, or they didn't find him challenging enough to give Danny Rick any sort of competition. And that's where Esteban Ocon came on to the scene. Esteban Ocon maybe had the benefit of Danny Rick still trying to figure out what exactly to do with that Renault car, because I think we can now safely say, a couple of car stops removed, the most confusing point of Danny Ric's career was his Renault involvement, because we thought that would be the surest thing. And now in hindsight, that seems to be the most confusing patch of his career, because he truly couldn't figure that car out and that car couldn't figure him.
He had great results in the Renault.
What was the great result?
Dipped. He had a couple of podiums. He finished top 10 a fair amount of races.
That's fair, but the expectation for him going to Renault was he was going to be the missing link that brought them the world championship. At least that was the bill of goods we were sold. Hindsight is a motherfucker.
But I think the confusing thing was with him leaving. I agree with you. Was Danny Ric leaving there because they had some pace and it seemed like they were on the up and up, and then he just was like, "No, I'm cool. I'm going to McLaren." But going back to the Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon thing, I think it just doesn't make sense to me to shit where you eat, especially when you're trying to. You could argue your career. You could argue that he was like, I'm a race car driver. I'm looking for a seat. I'm going to try to get the best position possible. But it's 1 point difference. It is 1 point instead of 2 points. So if you want to show to the other teams that you're a team player when that's already in question because you have a history of crashing into your teammates, why not be like, okay, let's go get them. Swap places as soon as you can. Let's go get them.
But I do think ultimately the reason why he didn't do it, and this is something we alluded to, is I think he's already got his seat. And if you already have a seat like that, I get that you want to make sure you continue to give off the impression of playing nice with others. But if he's got that other seat and he's essentially been treated like crap, not necessarily entirely by Alpine, but also the fans based on his social media messaging, that man looks like he's one at his wit's end. And he couldn't get out of Dodge faster. And he did the classic passive-aggressive move, which we would anticipate, which is, hey, I still did my team orders. You asked me to switch. You didn't tell me when I needed to switch explicitly, so I gave him that. And he made a point to stick the boot in, so to speak, and say, I'm a good teammate. I did what I was asked to do. The team failed me, which is very incendiary, but based on the letter of the law, technically he's right.
Where's your guess then? Where he's going?
Oh, I think it's Haas.
I don't think it's Haas.
I feel like Haas is more likely to just stick with K-Mag and Hulkenberg.
No, but Hulkenberg is out, and because I think Ollie Bierman, everyone's favorite Ferrari driver, is at Haas next year. And based on what we've seen, I don't think K-Mag is long for this world. And I think it's really funny because now if I had to kind of make a comparison, if K-Mag leaves, I think Ocon takes the K-Mag spot in terms of the most polarizing driver to not really do anything except for the fact that Ocon has a couple of podiums and he's won a race, no matter how you want to consider it. And yes, it was Fernando Alonso aided, but he still had to hold off both Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel, which is something we all completely forget about. Because for all of Alonso's defensive brilliance, eventually Lewis Hamilton, in his peak, still got past him.
Yeah.
I think.
I just don't see the Haas thing though, because I feel like they would want to go with a more marketable driver because they've really stepped into the whole marketing their drivers thing with the Chipotle and the Palm Angels and MoneyGram and
for sure. But then at the end of the day, who are their current drivers, right? You have Hulkenberg, who is not marketable other than the fact that a lot of people consider him the best driver never to podium in this modern era. And K-Mag, who is about as friendly and cuddly as a box of porcupines. So,
no, I mean, I feel like the driver thing happened first, or they kind of both happened in a vacuum, right?
Yes.
Where it wasn't saying like we're going to go step into marketing this year. It was like, hey, we're going to go get a couple pairs of steady hands, and we just happen to land all these sponsors, so we're going to force these box of porcupines to do our awkward Chipotle ads.
And so here's
what happened.
Fair. I would also say this. The thing is, in this hypothetical scenario, and like I said, we're not breaking news. We're not in the news breaking business. We're just a couple of yahoos who like to talk to each other about fast cars and faster drivers. It's the rare situation as well with Ocon where he truly, if he goes to Haas, he is the unconditional number one on this team. He's never had that before in his career. And I do think with that comes a certain maturity, and that's what I would bank my money on, so to speak, of that making the most sense for him and hopefully instilling some sort of attitude change.
You think if it's Ocon and Ollie Behrman, next year that he's the number one.
Are they going to give Ollie Behrman the number one spot on that team? At worst, Ocon will be the number one driver for the first year. And then if we all believe that Ollie Behrman's going to take him to the cleaners like we think he is, he'll be the number two driver the second year. But historical precedence to me tells me they're not going to give the world to a 17-year-old driver in his first competitive full season.
Yeah. I just don't see Haas. I just don't see Haas signing him. I would say the one spot he maybe has left is Sauber because they're in a transitional phase, and I think Ocon at best will be able to get a 1-year deal.
Fair. So if I can ask you both the question then, who does go into that Haas chair then? And we've kind of outlined a criteria in terms of what we think they're looking for, which is a marketable driver, somebody to possibly mentor this new next-gen driver who's on the come-up. Like, is there anybody on the grid right now that fits that profile? Because I can think of one person. I don't know if he's going there because, for all intents and purposes, he is headed to Williams.
I think it's the same guy you're talking about.
So you think
mullet lovey, budgie smuggling, Valtteri Bottas?
I was going with the smooth operator Spaniard Carlos Sainz because I thought that would make more sense. But talk to me more about this Bottas transfer.
I think Bottas and Haas makes a lot of sense. It sounds like I don't think he's past this year on his contract, right?
No.
I think both seats are open at Sauber.
Yep.
I don't see them re-signing him. And I think Valtteri is just looking for a place to drive into the sunset, so to speak. I think Haas, I outlined him on the last pod of why I think he's a good addition to a low-level team. But him coaching up Ollie Behrman in addition to good car feedback under Omatsu. What's his name?
Omatsu, I think is
Komatsu.
Komatsu.
Komatsu. Yeah.
Arigato angvalsan.
That's where I think he lands. So I think if Esteban has a chance at any seat, it's a 1-year deal at Sauber.
Who pairs alongside him then? Because the Sauber thing is the one thing I can't figure out. I can't make heads or tails of what that team looks like next year.
Yeah, that's a really tricky one. Maybe they borrow a junior or something to fill in the gap for a year, and while Sainz does his year at Williams before they turn into Audi or something. It sounds like by all accounts Sainz is going to Williams, and by all accounts Ollie Behrman's going to be one of the Haas seats.
No, I think the Ollie Behrman thing is finalized, I'm pretty sure, but not Mick.
Before we move off of the Haas thing, as someone who's worked in marketing for all these years, I cannot understand how we're talking about Haas trying to have more personality with Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hülkenberg when you got rid of Gunther Steiner. And to reiterate my point, we watch racing every week or, every race. And like, it's still hard to remember the team principal's name because he's not out there on camera at all. You almost never see him even in interviews after the races, which is so counterintuitive to making your team more personable. Like, you had arguably the most easily sellable face in the pits with Gunther Steiner, and you switch all that to I don't know anything about Komatsu. He seems like that the team is performing better, but if you're looking for personalities, you have to consider the personality of your team principal, in my opinion, right? Like, these guys get as much camera time or more than most of the drivers. And it seems like backwards, like to your point, Todd, like the Chipotle ads with Gunther Steiner were great. Like, it was actually hilarious, and it's not something that I could see happening with either of the drivers and me being like, those guys are hilarious. I'm going to go watch them, I don't know, eat their protein bowls or whatever.
Yeah, but I think we also, correct me if I'm wrong, we've lauded Haas this year for being very boring and almost unlocking a new level of competency we haven't seen since early Gunther Steiner years. So if that is the case, they have to find the two drabbest, most boring drivers on the grid, and then they just become team window scenery.
But we're still in the Gunther Steiner era at Haas. He brought in all those sponsors because he was he's only half a season removed from his job there. So if we still have this kind of sponsorship level at Haas next year, it'll be interesting to see if they're going back to the personality of Sir Gene, or if they're going to continue this like fun-loving American team aspect that they've cultivated under Gunter.
Gunter. Oh, by the way, if we don't need a podcast episode name, can we just call it Unter Gunter?
Yes.
All hail Gunter.
Can we? I know we're about to wrap soon, but can we just get a 10-second ode to greatness? That was Alex Albon's amazing pass between Danny Rick and Esteban Ocon.
Yes,
that was definitely the pass of the weekend. That
might be the pass of like the decade.
That shit made my dookie twinkle, y'all.
I mean, I feel like it was like a perfect storm because they both got a little squirrely at that corner because of because it was like that tight chicane and it was still a little bit wet, and they both kind of got offline, one being on the inside, one being on the outside. But like he just was like, all right, foot down, send it. Let's see what happens. And man, it was perfect.
That's why I continued to ride or die for Mr. Albon. It was almost the opposite of that old Michael Vick clip where he made those two Viking defenders run into each other. Like this was almost that in reverse where he just passed through them and they continued to be separate. And that was just so cool to me. We continue to talk about how technically brilliant Alex Albon is in almost every facet of racecraft, whether it's his tire whispering, whether it's his ability to coax out an underappreciated, underrated effort out of what we considered at the time to be probably one of the worst cars we've seen in the more modern grid. And he just continues to be a wizard. And I am continually shocked that he does not get to get the same opportunities the way I feel Pierre Gasly has, the way now I can say, honestly, Checo Perez has, because I think he would be the fantastic second driver to Red Bull. But I don't know why, for whatever reason, he's never going to go back to that meat grinder of a farm.
Yeah, I mean, I hope he doesn't ever do it.
I mean, my dream pairing is him and Sainz for Audi / whatever that car company turns into.
That'd be interesting. There is no other real rumors around that second seat with Audi, right?
No,
just kind of assumed that it's going to be Sainz in one, and then they'll figure out the second.
Well, by all accounts, it sounds like Sainz is going to Williams.
And I'm hot take because we haven't had one of these in a long time. I almost think that they have told him to go to Williams and see what is Alex Albon like in a professional teammate sense, because it's a package deal. They're both going to be taking their talents to Audi, and they're going to win not one, not two, not three, not 4 races.
Yeah, I don't think Albon's ever leaving Williams, and if they ever let him go, they're idiots because he is the best thing that's happened to that team in 20 years.
Oh, I mean, all the hushed tones we were talking about with regards to George Russell being the sleeping giant of the British racing scene, and now we've come full circle because at the start of this episode, we were all kind of saying, I don't know if George is the guy. Albon's been the guy. He's been staring us right in the face. And it is truly a pleasure to watch that guy drive. And I think we can't really say that about half the grid.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I would love to see, honestly, I would love to see Williams just improve the car for him and have him, get further up into the points. It just, honestly, this weekend kind of sucked for him too. Cause getting taken out from
his future teammate.
Yeah. From his future teammate. But he was, I mean, that pass was incredible. That is
chef's kiss.
You try that 1,000 times on, your simulator or Gran Turismo, and you maybe hit once. and and you're doing it dry, no rain. You know, like it is just like that's one of those like we'll see the highlights for that for decades. I'm sure. Like people will go back to that and be like, remember, you know, Canada in 2024, kind of
like a through goes Hamilton thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Crofty. We'll see.
Let me ask you this: what's more impressive, his no pit stop performance last year when he was on the same set of tires for 60 laps, or this?
Yeah, the no pit stop performance.
Yeah, I think the no pit stop thing. I also think that the no pit stop thing. I think these guys could drive a lot longer on the tires that they're on. I think that they are spoiled in the fact that they can get new tires, so they do. But I think if there was some rule that said you had to, you know, run a whole race with one set of tires, even with the existing compounds that are out there, it wouldn't be as fast, but they would figure out how to do it and they'd find the limits of that tire. You know, that's what makes them great race car drivers to me. So
perfect.
Yeah.
And that's what makes a great podcast.
Well, I'll wrap you up with this. We just watched a great race, and we probably won't have another one for a while because up next is Spain, and it'll be dry as hell and boring as hell. So maybe we'll take another summer break. Who knows?
Now, before we go, what's our prediction besides Max winning?
I'm going against Max.
I like it.
I wouldn't put him on the podium next time either.
Not even in the podium.
No.
Oh, man. Listeners, that's what we call a tease. If you want to hear more about Todd's thoughts, have to tune into the next episode.
Exactly.
All
right. Make sure you hit the link in the description and join the community. We can talk about all these races in between our episodes. But we appreciate y'all. And you can find the links to these guys in the description as well, and myself. But most importantly, Exhaust Notes FM on all the platforms. Catch you in the next episode. Peace.
Focus, George. Focus.